published an article, it was a cover story in the New York Times magazine, Sunday magazine, saying how wonderfully we're doing in Vietnam, and we just stay the course, why we'll defeat the enemy. And I wrote a letter to the Times, which they published, saying not everyone who works for General Taylor subscribes to his view, and then I went on and gave my own view. So that sort of sat there like a lump. Nobody said anything for 6 months. And then I was really a wise guy in those days, and a reporter, or a guy who was purported to be a reporter, he was a stringer, in fact, for Newsweek, the magazine, said he's doing a story on people who work for the Defense Department who were opposed to the war. Could I interview you? What are you doing about this? I said, well, as a policy at IDA, you can spend 50% of your time on your own mathematics and 50% of your time cracking codes or whatever they do there. I'm not even sure I said that. And my algorithm lately has been, I'm spending all of my time in mathematics, and when the war is over, I'll spend an equal amount of time on their work so that I'll have matched it all up, see? So I said that to him. Then I went back to the office, and it occurred to me maybe I better tell my boss that I gave this interview. It was the only intelligent thought I'd had all day, but it came a little late. So I said, you know, I gave this interview. He said, gee, I better tell Taylor. He calls Taylor. Taylor said, fire him, and I was fired. So that was that. It happened. It happened in what seemed to me to be a microsecond. And the funny thing is that 3 days later, Lyndon Johnson announced he was not going to run for a second term. He was going to stop the bombing, and I figured the war was over. So I went back to my local boss, a very nice fellow, and I said, you know, why don't we just forget about all this? I mean, this whole damn thing is over. And he said, I don't think so. So I needed a job. And I wasn't very worried about finding a job because, you know, I was obviously competent as a research mathematician, so something would come up. But the Stony Brook was very appealing to me, to be a chairman. I thought that would be a lot of fun, and it was. Mm-hmm. It was.
That was in retrospect, all that was a good thing that happened to you.
I think it was a very good thing, yeah. Sure. I met Frank, I met my wife, all kinds of good things happened.
What was it about that war that you didn't like?
Well,
was it any war or just that one?
No, it's not any war. I think I would have been in favor of our fighting in the Second World War and so on. It's usually the example that everyone agrees is a justified war. I didn't think that there was such a big threat from the communists over there. I thought we were losing an awful lot of people. I thought we were taking our eyes off the ball that in America. It just seemed like a waste and very destructive, and you could feel the fabric of society tearing apart as the kids were marching and bodies were coming home, and we weren't getting anywhere. So it just seemed stupid to me. So,
some year '68 was.
It was a heck of a year, yeah. It was a heck of a year.
And after Jim came, after I got acquainted with him, one day he came to me and said, let's organize an anti-war fund. And so we did, and I talked about that last night, and also Irving Krah talked about that. We raised a lot of money, I forgot how much, to contribute to the anti-war effort. And in fact, at that time, we raised more money on this campus than on any other campus in the United States. All these anti-war funds drives was springing up on all campuses, and much larger campuses like Berkeley and Michigan did not raise as much money as we did here.
Well, I mean,
and I think that I was saying something else, that Frank's agreeing to co-head that made a huge difference because, first of all, he had such respect in the university, and second of all, I think he was taking some risk because, you know, he was a Chinese guy and maybe had relatives. I mean, I don't know, but I think he was taking some risk.
It's true, because the U.S. has always been, some people in the U.S. government is a little bit always suspicious of me because my field is physics, deeply related to nuclear physics. Edward Teller was my thesis advisor.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that.
And I was close to Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer,
so I'm sure the CIA has my files this thick. And then in 1971, I visited China for the first time. The reason that I informed the
communist China, we might say.
Right.
What was known then as communist China.
China and the U.S. fought a war in the first two wars, in fact, first in Korea, then in Vietnam. And in 1971, I was able to visit because with the ping-pong diplomacy, I can tell that Nixon and Mao wanted to talk to each other because both of them were afraid of the Soviet Union. And so I decided to visit. And after I decided that, I decided that it's not good if I do not tell the White House. So I wrote to the science advisor, David, Mr. David.
Ed David.
Do you know him?
Yeah, I don't know him well, but I know him.
He visited me in Tsinghua 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I wrote to him, and to my surprise, he answered saying that we are delighted that you are going to visit China, but we cannot help you to get a visa. Now, I didn't need the help. I had already written to my father, and my father applied to the Chinese government, and then they said, fine, ask your son to get the visa, the Chinese visa, in the Chinese embassy in Paris. There was only 2 Chinese embassies in Western countries, in Ottawa and in Paris. So I got it in Paris, and after I came back, immediately the CIA visited me several times. I told them I pay U.S. taxes. I'm a U.S. citizen. I do not do anything that's unlawful. But I was very careful.
Yeah, so...
because what happened is the following. The CIA man came, or rather he called, and he insisted on visiting me in my house, which is on Daniel Webster. I didn't know why. I said, why don't we just go to my office? No. He wanted to be in my house. So the more he insisted, the more I declined that. So finally, he came to my office. And after a few minutes of conversation, 2 of them came. And they, as soon as we sat down in my office on a table, they immediately opened their file and took out some documents. I become alerted because I already know that this is the way they trap people. If they can eventually say that you had seen some secret document. So I said, hold on. I got my secretary to come in, to sit there. And later she signed an affidavit saying that she was there when throughout the conversation I had with the CIA man. Because I told the CIA man, my parents are in China, and I still want to visit them. I do not want to be entangled with any secret stuff in the United States which may prevent my legally going to China again. And that was a very clever move. And the next day, I called the NSF. We had a contract with the NSF.
NSF.
The NSF did not know about this. There was a man named, I forgot, who was in charge of the Stony Brook grant. So I called him, and he said, great, here investigate. Then after a couple of hours, he called me, and he said, you did a very intelligent thing by telling me about this. Because in Washington, there are many branches, and they are not informing each other. And if the NSF didn't know that the CIA man had visited me, there may be some confusion which put the NSF sort of in a bad light. By my telling the NSF immediately about this, they were in a stronger position. Well, I understand that the CIA has its job, because clearly China also has agents here, and just like the U.S. has agents. The world is very complicated. What one has to be careful about is not to get entangled, not to get suckered into things like this.
Yeah, well, that was very interesting.
Yeah, I remember I did a very famous Watergate story like that, where one of the Watergate guys went to Judge Sirica in his chambers and said, I've got this document I want to give you, and the judge, no, and called in a court reporter, a stenographer, to record everything that took place with the passing of that document.
Yeah, well, that was very good. Anyway, there was a great success raising that money, and I think Frank was quite courageous to have taken on the publicly visible post of, co-head of this thing, and it worked out fine.
It naturally raises the next question, which is how you feel, either of you, if you feel strongly at all about what's going on now with the so-called war on terror. Does that disturb you as much as Vietnam did, Dr. Simons?
Well, I think the Iraq War was a terrible mistake. We're not bringing back as many dead people from it. So in that sense, and it hasn't caused the furor, the dislocations that Vietnam did. On the other hand, I think it's definitely one of the worst pieces of public policy I ever saw. I think we were suckered into it. I think we were misled by the administration. If there really were a bunch of atomic bombs over there, okay, but there weren't, and they knew there weren't. So I feel misled, and now we have to figure out a way to wind that down and get the heck out of there. But it isn't simple. I mean, we can't. I don't think we can just say goodbye suddenly. We've created such a mess. We have to clean it up somehow or other. But it was a bad business. Anyway, that's what I think. Frank, maybe you have a different view.
I think it's clear that with the coming election, the new president will try to extract the U.S. from the mess in Iraq. Whatever the original reason, whatever the original strategy, it is clear that what has happened created tension in the United States and weakened the U.S. Internationally. So something has to be done. Of course, how to do it is a complicated. It's a little bit like the Vietnam War. How to solve this problem would be, I think, the chief responsibility of the next president.
You spend a lot of time in China now. How is the relationship between China and the U.S. developing, in your opinion?
I think it's going very well. I think in the first place, I moved back to China. Actually, I've been going back to China back and forth repeatedly, but in 2003, after my first wife died, I moved back completely. So now I spend almost 10 months, 11 months in China and Shanghai and Hong Kong, and only visit the U.S. occasionally. And I can see within the last 5 years, there has been an enormous change in A, China's position in the world, and B, the relationship between the Chinese government and Washington. And all of this, in my opinion, are for the good for international relations. The most obvious thing is about North Vietnam and then North Korea. This six-sided talk was initiated by the Chinese side, and it's clear it has not yet been successful, but it has already accomplished a lot. And I think it's everybody believes, I think everybody, including the North Koreans, that this is the way to go. Despite all the difficulties, it's making steady, although slow, progress. And without this, it could be very disruptive, could have led to a disastrous war. So I'm sure President Bush is very appreciative of this. There are, of course, lots of frictions. A country as large as China, which is trying to pull itself out of poverty, is meets with tremendous problems. I have said publicly that what China is trying to do is to compress in 40 years the progress made by the West in 400 years. And of course, when you do it with such a rate, it's bound to create problems. By the way, I should say here, and I told the story last night, I asked